Kapeesh Sharma, who is the head of procurement raw materials indirect apex with Pernod Ricard. He is a procurement leader with international leadership experience gained through working and living in Europe and Asia. Demonstrated ability in managing end-to-end procurement cycle, supply chain projects, hands-on experience in leading strategic sourcing projects, digital transformation, performance-driven category management, supplier relationship management, and team coaching development. Can we please welcome him with a big round of applause, please? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think this is perhaps the most difficult session because I'm trying to fight against your metabolic instincts of letting you sleep. And yeah, exactly. But I'll try my best. I'll try to make it interesting. What I'm going to cover today is really a real case study which is pertaining to Pernod Ricard. This is about how we went about the digital transformation at a global scale. So this is something which we did internationally. And how did we really use data and analytics to unlock the procurement value? Okay, but before I go there, I think this quote really summarizes the power of data. So maybe someone knows the gentleman on the right-hand side. Anyone recognizes him? No, he's the one who said this. In God we trust, all others must bring data. Okay, so this gentleman is Edward Deming. Maybe you heard about the PDCA cycle, Plan, Do, Check, Act. So he's the one who's responsible for that. And I think it really captures how powerful is data. Okay, so what I am going to try and cover today in the next 15 minutes is really a quick introduction about digital transformation analytics and how does it help procurement. What should be the strategic vision for organizations who are kind of charting that journey. Digital tools and assets, key part of any transformation program, data backbone. And then lastly, which is perhaps a lot overlooked, is about required resources and investment when you run these kind of programs. But before I get there, let's look at why organizations typically go on this kind of a journey, and why data and analytics are must to have. So these are three very fundamental questions which organizations always face. The first one is why, and perhaps the answer is simple after you saw what Edward Deming said, that data-driven decisions are really decisions which have got high probability to succeed. Okay, and these are really at the heart of what we call as procurement value creation. What do we mean by these transformation is also very important to understand. So it's not about a technology deployment, it's not about selecting the best tool. It's really about optimizing your procurement processes, right? Which are then enabled by data, then enabled by a tool to deliver high impact. So that's really the how or the what of these transformation programs. And then lastly, how do you deliver them? Now, there's obviously a great pull to talk about ROIs and deliver impacts and make it a big bang success. But in reality, these are not big bang successes, right? You have to start with a very clear end vision. Where do I want to be? 2025, 2030, I think one of my fellow speakers talked about it. And then be cognizant of the fact that it's not a straight line journey. You take the journey, you'll understand there are bottlenecks in between. You might have to reroute a bit, and then deliver impact, but also be cognizant of the fact that there'll be a change of plan, and that's what really captures the essence of agile methodology. So what I wanted to share on this chart was really the procurement maturity journey any organization will have. So from left to right, as you read it through, there are broadly 5 levels of procurement maturity for any organization, right? On the left-hand side, you see operational procurement, which is really, really transactional in nature. You get a PR, you process a PO. That's it. Okay. Then you move on to strategic sourcing, where you are really looking at your category structure, category strategies, and so on and so forth. Most of the organizations today are in the center, where we say category management journey, where you look at total cost of ownership and perhaps zero-based budget management. Analytics we use a bit. A lot of organizations are into, let's say, the early stages of analytics usage. But really the push is how do we move from the center to those 4 and 5 levels, where data and analytics start to play a key role, right? If you look at number 5, what it talks about is really predictive analytics. So instead of looking at the past data and kind of building a business case, how can you leverage data to predict future and predict what's going to happen, be it your budgeting exercises or be it your supplier scorecards or your supplier behaviors. So that's really the continuum of procurement maturity, and where data and analytics come into play is really push you from 3 to more 4 and 5 journey. Right. So that was a quick introduction on where data and analytics fit into procurement and how does it really accelerate the maturity. Now, if you look at this slide, really the strategic vision when you deploy a digital and analytics program in your organizations, there are 3 fundamental things which we must look at, right? And these are not in any order. The first one is digital tools and assets, and speakers in the first half of the session really talked a lot about different kind of tools, what is the ecosystem, what is best of breed, what is end-to-end suite, what are the benefits, pros and cons. But really the key message here is any tool and asset should be deployed keeping your organization's need in mind, right? A Ferrari, and again, I borrow the analogy from previous session. A Ferrari is as good if you're actually driving it, right? A Ferrari kept in a garage is really worthless. So that's really the starting point of digital tools. Also, when you deploy a digital tool, what is very, very important is to keep the data needs in mind. So every tool runs on a certain kind of a data and generates those insights. But what you need to do right at the start is map your data backbone, map your data requirements, and if need be, invest your time in getting that mapping right rather than getting straight away into a digital tool selection. The second fundamental block of any digital or analytics transformation is around data, right? And if I have to really bring them in an order, I would rather put data first, then tools, and then the third part. So here, a lot of time data resides in IT systems and there's no clear defined responsibility of who's responsible for that data. Either it will sit in your ERPs or it will sit in some legacy system. So it's very, very important right at the start to align ownership and responsibility with your IT teams, because that's really a key success factor. Also, we've seen in our organization, and I'm sure it's true for many others, similar data sits in multiple systems, right? So it's also very important to have single source of truth of data. Otherwise, you'll have multiple data feeding into the same system and generating insights which are not worth it. And also, data availability in the right quality and granularity is equally important. And that brings me to the third fundamental block, which is really about operating model, right? Tools and data are important, but what is vital is people who manages those tools and people who manages those data, right? So an organization structure which takes you to a maturity level of 3 may not be sufficient to take you to a maturity level of 4. So whenever we are running a digital transformation or a digital TICS agenda, it's very important to keep your operating model in mind how will you transform the roles of your current teams, and this is really where the leadership pitches in, because you may need some really specialist roles when you embark on this journey. And again, I'll pick up some cues from the panel discussion earlier. It's very important to have your teams involved at the right time at the design stage itself, and then train them and skill them up so that these are the guys who will really leverage the power of what you're deploying. So these are really the fundamental blocks, and I'll probably delve a bit deeper into each one of them. So starting with the digital tools and assets, I think what is critical in this chart, if you just have to read 3 words on this chart, I think the first 3 words are the most pertinent: fit for purpose, right? That's exactly what you need to look for in your tool and assets when you are trying to optimize performance. So what I've tried to do here is look at different procurement activities which each of us are driving in our organization. Look at the value creation which this activity will drive. So really, when you analyze your spend, the objective is to identify some of those potential savings which you can get from your analysis. Similarly, if you are looking at optimizing demand, you look at specification of what you're buying and how can you optimize those specifications. So this is really a representation of a source to pay cycle. The first 3 or 4 are more strategic in nature, and then you've got your classical procure to pay. Now what is important is on each set of activities, you identify what is your need and what are the priority use cases you want to drive. This is a very busy chart, and the idea was to share what all you can do in digital transformation. But the key point here is to identify what are the priority areas you want to drive, because it's not a big bang transformation. It's a journey where it's important to take 1 step at a time, learn from it. Maybe you need to change a bit in terms of your processes and go on that journey. So map all the use cases which are important for the organization, because that's your end state, and then identify some priority cases. Let's say in our case, when we deployed this program, we very, very quickly realized that analysis of data and the 𝗍𝗹𝘃 processes are critical to deliver first level of successes, which will fund the journey going forward and deploy further use cases. So that's really a kind of a template which you guys can use and deploy in the organizations. Now that brings me to the second fundamental building block of any transformation, which is around data, right? As I said earlier, tools are good, tools are fantastic, but if you don't have the right set of data to feed into the tool, the output is not what you'll expect. So when we embarked on this journey at a global level, one of the key tasks was to identify what all data types are there which a procurement professional would need, map it on a ease of access, red, green, yellow. Is it available easily today? Is it available but it needs a little bit of massaging on the data? And there are data points which are not available today, right? So we kind of bucketed them into 5 or 6 different categories. There's transactional data, there is supplier data, there is technical data in terms of the specifications of what you're buying, and so on and so forth. So map all your data, what all you would need in the end state. Put a ease of access against each one of them. Also run a frequency at which you like to, get that data in your tools. And also map expected sources of that data. So wherever you've got a green, you know what is the source of data, but there are data points which are red, where you only got a fair idea of where I can harvest that data, but at this point it doesn't exist. So that's another important building block of any transformation program. And then quickly, once you've got identified data sources, there are typically 2 choices you have in terms of the data architecture design. Again, live example, these are the two choices which we had, where we knew, okay, we've got data sources, and data needs to be stored, needs to be transformed, cleaned to make it or to convert it into insights, and then consumed for reports or for processing. So the two choices which typically most of the organizations would have is, where do we store this data? Should we have a end-to-end suite? Because most of these end-to-end suites also have a data warehouse where you can store all kind of data, make it a single source of truth, and then run your various use cases on that data. Or choice number two, which is the one which we took finally, was to keep data custody in-house. So the data sources feed into a data lake or a cloud, which is then fed into a procurement database, and then you use that data to run multiple tools. So as an example, the spend data of a supplier can be used to run a spend queue, can also be used to run a supplier performance scorecard, and so on and so forth. So you've got a big data warehouse where you've got all the data coming in and flowing into different use cases. So these are the two choices. Again, no sacred answer. It depends on what your needs are and what is the kind of architecture exists in the organization. And that brings me to the last fundamental building block of any transformation. I started on the tools. You've got data, and then often I would say highly underestimated, but perhaps most important is the capability building around data and analytics program, because what brought you to the level of maturity of 3 is not sufficient to take you to the maturity level of 4 or 5. So any capability program should focus on at least 3 skills, and I say at least because there are more, but these are bare minimum. Okay, the first one is procurement hard skills, which most of us are very well adept at, which is really looking at procurement basics. You know, running your spend analysis, developing a sourcing strategy, or also looking at negotiation essentials. Okay. The second one is the data and analytics skills, and these are very, very specialized skills. Often we fall into the trap of assuming that, okay, I mean, if you've got the hard skills, you also have the data and analytics soft skills. But these are really specialized roles, if I say that. So this is really looking at data and how do you convert it into meaningful insights. Okay, it's also looking at preparing those business cases for data programs. How do you ensure that there's an ROI and there's a capability building around your programs? Okay, and the last one is really the skills for the leadership team of procurement, which I have called as soft skills. But these are absolutely essential, which is looking at problem solving, because there will be problems on the way. How do you communicate for impact? Again, you know, whenever you are on this journey, communication is vital. You know, you have to keep your users engaged, you have to keep your users in the loop, and that's where the leadership role comes. Also building trust in the organization that this is the right way forward, and managing the whole change piece. Okay, changes are not pleasant. Let's accept that fact. How do you navigate that change and make sure that the whole organization is with you? And then clearly a bias for action. You know, there's an end state in mind, and the leaders have got this responsibility to drive the organization towards that end state. And the last part which I mentioned here at the bottom is, you know, it is also about that blessing and mandate from the board, because these are not deployment of tools. These are not deployment of a data warehouse or a data lake, right? Unless the management has a clear mandate, these programs often tend to get into a backseat, right? So it's important that you've got that mandate from the top. you've got those range of new roles in mind, you might have to develop a center of excellence which really drives this program forward. And that's again one of our learnings where we did deploy a center of excellence and we could see the power of how it helps in the successful journey. Now this is a chart kept by purpose very blurred because this is the data and the tool landscape. And I think it's not even dated. It's 2019, okay? So it's a crowded space. It's a very, very crowded space, okay? And the hard part is it's very difficult to differentiate one from the other. The capabilities are broadly similar, right? If you're looking at a spend cube, you've got CFO, you've got GP, you've got some best of breed, you've got 𝗂𝗏. Broadly speaking, they have similar capabilities. Now, what differentiates a good solution from a bad solution is what you need as your organization's requirement, right? So what I've tried to do is try to make a sense of this busy, crowded space, okay? So broadly, there are three kind of service providers in the market. What you see on the right-hand circle is what typically you'll call as end-to-end suites or source-to-pay cycle, okay? You've got 𝗂𝗏, you've got 𝗍𝗏, you've got GP, 𝗔, oracles of the world. In the middle, you'll see best of breed solutions, right? Which focus on a niche category, okay? And by virtue of focusing on a niche category, they've got really deep capabilities in that category. So let's say if you had to pick one of them, Roslyn is really, really strong in the data backbone, right? You've got solutions which can run RFXs with multiple simulation capabilities and really go into different kind of scenarios. So these are the ones which sit in the middle. And then on the right-hand side are your procurement consulting agencies, McKinseys of the world, who consult the organization, but also have got their own tools, by the way. They'll also share, okay, this is the tool for a program management, right? Now, the moot or the basic question is still there, which one is something you have to go with. And I think there's no easy answer. You have to find your own way and look for something which works best in your kind of a scenario, right? So what I would say is look at the capabilities of the service providers, but also look at the maturity of your organization itself, right? I'll probably, for the last time, I'll take that example of, if you've got a Ferrari, and if you don't know how to drive a car, I think that's worthless, okay? So the first objective is to learn how to drive a car, okay? Then look for what is actually a need, and then decide which car you want to buy, okay? You can't put the cart before the horse, and that's a classical trap. So that's very important to make sense of this crowded space. And before I conclude, I think last chart on my deck, it's very, very important that your process optimization precedes your tool deployment, okay? It's a journey, okay? It's not going to happen and again, from our own example, we started this journey about 12 months back. Very, very carefully, we've deployed 3 tools, okay? 3 sub-activities, we've kind of made it go live. We are not in a rush to deploy more. We are looking at what value does it bring to the organization? Is it funding my journey? And then go on that end state vision. But I'll leave you with this last thought, which is this gentleman on the right is 𝗔𝗶𝗆. I think most of you recognize. He said, change before you have to, right? Digital is not the next wave. Digital is today, right? So don't wait for this change, because change is here. So I wish you the best of luck in your own journeys, and I'm happy to take if you've got any questions. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Kapeesh sir. Do we have any questions? pleasure listening to you. Each word very well articulated. So if digital is today, what is the future?
Very good question. I don't know. But I think the capabilities in digital is also going to evolve as we go by, right? What I really see coming up in the future is more on the AI side, right? Where you've got those predictive analytics coming into play. To be honest, my chart where I showed quantum or the continuum of 1 to 5, and this is a chart which I borrowed from McKinsey. As per McKinsey, nobody today is on 5, right? Of course, because that's the ideal state, that's the end vision. And one of the key use cases which you see on project or maturity level 5 is predictive analytics, right? Where you start to have a prediction and a fair amount of confidence in that prediction. And I think that's really where digital is going to take us, where we'll build more artificial intelligence capabilities and start having more confidence in our predictive capabilities.
Great, thank you so much for your insightful session, and I would request you to please stay back for a minute. I would like to invite on stage Mr. 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗏 to please come forward and felicitate Mr. Kapeesh. Please give them a huge round of applause.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot, sir.